I never expected my life to change so dramatically on a sunny Sunday afternoon. The annual family barbecue at my parents' sprawling backyard was in full swing, the air filled with the aroma of grilled burgers and the chatter of relatives catching up. "Megan, sweetheart, can you come here for a moment?" Mom called from the patio, her voice carrying a hint of something I couldn't quite place. I made my way through the crowd, balancing a plate of potato salad in one hand and my daughter's juice box in the other. "What's up, Mom?" Dad stood next to her, his usual jovial expression replaced by an uncharacteristically serious one. "We need to talk to you about something important," he said, gesturing towards the empty chairs. As I sat down, I caught sight of Peter across the yard. My best friend since college, he gave me a curious look, sensing the tension even from a distance. "Honey," Mom began, her fingers nervously twisting the napkin in her lap, "your father and I have been thinking about the future of the business." I nodded, unsure where this was going. The family hardware store had been a fixture in our small town for 3 generations. Dad cleared his throat. "We've decided it's time to start planning for retirement, and we want you to take over the business." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. "What? Me?" I sputtered, nearly dropping my plate. "But I don't know anything about running a hardware store." "You're smart, Megan," Dad said firmly. "You've got a good head for numbers, and you know how to talk to people. We'll teach you everything else." I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed. "But what about Uncle Jim? Or Cousin Mark? They've both worked at the store for years." Mom reached out and squeezed my hand. "We've thought long and hard about this, sweetie. You're the right choice. We trust you to carry on the family legacy." As if on cue, Peter appeared at my side, concern etched on his face. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his eyes darting between me and my parents. "Peter," Dad exclaimed, his face brightening. "Perfect timing. We were just telling Megan about our decision to make her the successor to the family business." Peter's eyebrows shot up. "Wow, that's big news," he said, giving me a supportive smile. "Congratulations, Meg." I forced a weak smile in return, my mind racing. How could I possibly run a business and be a single mom? What about my job at the library? And what would the rest of the family say? As if reading my thoughts, Mom leaned in. "We know it's a lot to take in, honey, but we believe in you, and we'll be here to help every step of the way." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Can I have some time to think about it?" Dad nodded. "Of course, but don't take too long. We'd like to start the transition soon." As they stood to rejoin the party, leaving me reeling from the news, I felt Peter's hand on my shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "want to take a walk?" Grateful for the escape, I nodded and followed him towards the old oak tree at the edge of the property. "So," Peter said as we walked, "future business mogul, huh?" I let out a shaky laugh. "God, Peter, what am I going to do? I can't run a business. I'm barely keeping it together as it is." He stopped and turned to face me, his expression serious. "Megan, listen to me. You're one of the most capable people I know. If anyone can do this, it's you." I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "But what about Emily? How can I be a good mom and run a business?" Peter's voice was gentle but firm. "The same way you've been an amazing mom while working at the library. You'll figure it out. And you won't be alone. I'll be here to help, whatever you need." As I looked into his eyes, I felt a flutter in my chest that had nothing to do with my newfound responsibilities. Before I could respond, a commotion from the patio caught our attention. "Oh no," I groaned, recognizing the raised voices. "Sounds like Uncle Jim just found out." Peter squeezed my hand. "Ready to face the music?" Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "As I'll ever be." Together, we headed back towards the house, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The hardware store loomed before me, its faded sign a stark reminder of the responsibility now resting on my shoulders. I took a deep breath, clutching my coffee cup like a lifeline as I pushed open the door. "Morning, Megan." Uncle Jim called from behind the counter, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The tension from the family barbecue still lingered, thick as the dust on the shelves. "Morning, Uncle Jim," I replied, forcing a cheerfulness I didn't feel. "Ready to show me the ropes?" he grunted, gesturing vaguely towards the back office. "Your father's waiting for you. Good luck." As I made my way through the aisles, doubt gnawed at my insides. What did I know about inventory management or profit margins? I was a librarian, for heaven's sake. Dad looked up as I entered, his face lighting up. "There's my girl. Ready to learn the family business?" I nodded weakly, sinking into the chair across from him. For the next few hours, he walked me through spreadsheets, supplier contracts, and employee schedules. My head spun with information overload. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Dad said, noticing my overwhelmed expression. "You'll get the hang of it in no time." Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Peter. "How's it going, future CEO? Lunch later?" I smiled, feeling a flutter of warmth. Peter's unwavering support had been my anchor these past few weeks. As I typed a quick reply, Dad cleared his throat. "So you and Peter seem to be getting pretty close," he said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. I felt my cheeks heat up. "We're just friends, Dad." He raised an eyebrow. "Uh-huh. Well, just remember, mixing business and pleasure can be tricky, especially with his family's hotel empire." I frowned, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Dad leaned back in his chair. "I'm just saying, the Caldwells are big fish in a small pond. Peter's father has some aggressive business practices. I'd hate to see you get caught in the crossfire." Before I could respond, the office door burst open. Uncle Jim stood there, his face flushed. "We've got a problem. The Caldwell Hotel just placed a massive order with our biggest competitor. We're going to lose half our commercial accounts." My stomach dropped. I looked at Dad, expecting him to take charge, but he just nodded at me. "What do you think we should do, Megan?" Panic rose in my throat. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, being thrust into a situation I wasn't prepared for. But as I looked at the expectant faces of my father and uncle, I knew I had to step up. "Okay," taking a deep breath. "Let's call our supplier and see if we can negotiate better prices. Then we'll reach out to our commercial clients and offer them a loyalty discount." Uncle Jim nodded grudgingly. "Not bad, kid. I'll make the calls." As he left, Dad squeezed my shoulder. "See? You've got good instincts. You'll do just fine." I managed a weak smile, but inside my mind was racing. How could Peter's family do this to us? And what did it mean for my relationship with Peter? Later, as I sat across from Peter at our favorite diner, I couldn't shake the unease. He chatted animatedly about his day, but I barely heard him, lost in my own thoughts. "Meg?" "Earth to Megan," Peter said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You okay?" I blinked, focusing on his concerned expression. "Sorry, just a lot on my mind." "Peter, did you know about your father's deal with our competitor?" His face fell, guilt flashing in his eyes. I heard something about it. But Meg, you have to understand it's just business. My father—" "Just business?" I interrupted, anger flaring. "Peter, this could ruin my family's livelihood." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Megan, please, I'm caught in the middle here. My father's been pushing me to take on more responsibility at the hotel, but I don't want it to come between us." I stared at him, torn between my feelings for Peter and my loyalty to my family. "I don't know if it's that simple anymore," I said softly. As I looked into Peter's pleading eyes, I realized that taking over the family business wasn't just about learning spreadsheets and inventory. It was about navigating a complex web of relationships and loyalties. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that challenge. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down my dress for the 100th time. The thought of meeting Peter's parents made my stomach churn. After the fallout from the Caldwell Hotel's business move, I wasn't sure what to expect. "Mommy, you look pretty," Emily chirped from the doorway, her gap-toothed smile melting away some of my anxiety. I scooped her up, breathing in her comforting scent. "Thanks, sweetie. Now you be good for Grandma tonight, okay?" The doorbell rang, and my heart leaped into my throat. Peter stood there, looking dashing in a suit, a bouquet of flowers in his hand. "Meg, you look beautiful," he said, his eyes warm. "Ready to meet the parents?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. The drive to the Caldwell mansion was tense, filled with Peter's nervous chatter about his family's quirks. As we pulled up to the sprawling estate, my jaw dropped. "Peter, this is intimidating," he squeezed my hand. "They're just people, Meg. I promise they don't bite." The front door swung open before we could knock, revealing a petite woman with Peter's kind eyes. "You must be Megan," she exclaimed, pulling me into an unexpected hug. "I'm Caroline. Come in, come in." Peter's father, Robert, was waiting in the living room. He stood as we entered, his imposing figure softened by a genuine smile. "Welcome, Megan. We've heard so much about you." As we settled in for drinks, I braced myself for interrogation or thinly veiled contempt. Instead, I found myself drawn into a warm conversation about my daughter, my work at the library, and my newfound role at the family hardware store. "It's not easy taking over a family business," Robert said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I remember when I first started at the hotel, scared out of my wits." I blinked, caught off guard by his candor. "Really? But you've been so successful," he chuckled. "Success doesn't come overnight, my dear. It takes hard work, determination, and a bit of luck." As the evening progressed, I found myself relaxing. Caroline regaled us with embarrassing stories from Peter's childhood, while Robert offered thoughtful advice on business management. During a lull in the conversation, I gathered my courage. "Mr. Caldwell, I have to ask about the deal with our competitor." Robert's expression turned serious. "Ah, yes, I owe you an apology, Megan. I didn't realize the impact it would have on your family's business. I've already spoken to my team about finding a way to make it right." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, that means a lot." As Peter and his father discussed some hotel business, Caroline drew me aside. "Megan, dear, I hope you know how happy we are that Peter's found you. You bring out the best in him." Warmth bloomed in my chest. "He does the same for me," I admitted softly. The evening ended on a high note, with promises of future family dinners and even offers of business advice. As Peter drove me home, I felt a mix of relief and confusion. "See? I told you they'd love you," Peter said, grinning. I nodded, lost in thought. "They're not what I expected. Your dad seems so different from how my father described him." Peter's smile faltered slightly. "Yeah, about that. Meg, there's something I need to tell you." We pulled up to my house, but I made no move to get out. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "My father, he's planning to retire soon, and he wants me to take over the hotel." My heart sank. "Oh, I see." "But that's not all," Peter continued, his voice urgent. "He wants to expand. He's talking about buying up smaller businesses in town, including—" "The hardware store," I finished, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Peter nodded miserably. "I tried to talk him out of it, but he's set on the idea. He thinks it's a smart business move." I stared at him, my mind reeling. The warm, humble couple I'd just met suddenly seemed like a facade. "And what do you think, Peter?" He hesitated, and in that moment, I saw our future hanging in the balance. His answer would determine everything: our relationship, my family's livelihood, the very fabric of our small town. "I think," he said slowly, "that we need to find a way to make this work for everyone. But Meg, I need you to trust me." As I looked into his pleading eyes, I realized that the real challenge was just beginning. Could I trust Peter to stand by me, or would his family's ambitions tear us apart? The days following Peter's revelation were a blur of sleepless nights and anxiety-filled mornings. I threw myself into work at the hardware store, desperately trying to find a way to make it thrive in the face of the Caldwell's expansion plans. One particularly exhausting afternoon, as I pored over inventory sheets, my phone buzzed. It was Caroline Caldwell. "Megan, dear," her warm voice came through the speaker. "Robert and I would love for you to join us for dinner tonight. There's something important we'd like to discuss." My stomach clenched. "Of course, I'd be happy to," I heard myself say, even as my mind raced with possibilities. As I pulled up to the Caldwell mansion that evening, Peter was waiting outside. His face was a mix of excitement and nervousness that did nothing to calm my frayed nerves. "Meg," he said, taking my hands. "Whatever happens in there, just know that I'm on your side, okay?" I nodded, not entirely sure I believed him. Inside, Robert and Caroline greeted us with warm smiles that seemed at odds with the tension I felt. We settled into the opulent dining room, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Finally, as dessert was served, Robert cleared his throat. "Megan, we've been impressed with how you've handled taking over your family's business. It's not an easy task." "Thank you," I said cautiously, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Caroline leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. "Which is why we have a proposition for you. We'd like to offer you a position as co-manager of our new hotel expansion." I blinked. Sure, I had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Robert nodded, looking pleased. "Instead of buying out smaller businesses, we've decided to focus on partnering with them." Your hardware store would be a key supplier for our new properties, and you'd have a seat at the table in managing the overall operation. My mind whirled. This was so far from what I'd expected that I didn't know how to respond. Peter squeezed my hand under the table. It's a chance for us to work together, Meg, to build something amazing. I looked at the eager faces around me, feeling a mix of hope and trepidation. This is a lot to take in. What about my parents' store? I can't just abandon it. Of course not, Caroline said quickly. The store would remain yours, but with our backing and resources, you could expand it beyond your wildest dreams. As they laid out more details of their plan, I found myself getting caught up in the excitement. The possibilities seemed endless. New jobs for the town, a chance to modernize the store, a future with Peter that didn't involve choosing between him and my family. But as the evening wore on, a nagging doubt began to creep in. Was this too good to be true? What were the Caldwells really after? As Peter walked me to my car later that night, I couldn't shake my unease. It all sounds wonderful, I said slowly, but I can't help feeling like there's something I'm missing. Peter's face fell slightly. Meg, I promise you, there's no hidden agenda here. My parents see your potential just like I do. They want to help, not take over. I wanted to believe him, but years of struggling as a single mom had taught me to be cautious. I need some time to think about it, I said finally. And to talk to my parents. This affects them too. Peter nodded, looking disappointed but understanding. As he leaned in to kiss me goodnight, I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with fear. This decision could change everything. My future, my family's legacy, my relationship with Peter. Driving home, my mind raced with possibilities and pitfalls. The Caldwells' offer was tempting, but was it worth the risk? Could I trust them and Peter with everything I held dear? As I pulled into my driveway, I saw my parents' car parked outside. They were waiting up, eager to hear about the dinner. In that moment, I realized the weight of the decision before me. It wasn't just about business or love. It was about loyalty, family, and the kind of person I wanted to be. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car ready to face whatever came next. One thing was certain. After tonight, nothing would ever be the same. The weeks following the Caldwells' proposal flew by in a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and late-night planning sessions. I found myself swept up in the excitement of it all, my initial doubts fading as I saw the potential for growth and success. Peter and I grew closer than ever, our shared vision for the future, bringing us together in ways I never imagined. One night, as we pored over blueprints for the new hotel expansion, he surprised me with a small velvet box. Meg, he said, his eyes shining, I can't imagine doing any of this without you. Will you marry me? My heart soared as I said yes, the diamond sparkling on my finger, a symbol of all the promises we'd made. But even as we dove into wedding plans, the reality of our new business venture began to set in. The hardware store was busier than ever, supplying materials for the hotel renovations, and I found myself stretched thin trying to manage it all. One particularly hectic morning, as I juggled phone calls and inventory orders, my father walked in, his face grave. Megan, we need to talk, he said, gesturing to the back office. My stomach dropped. What's wrong, Dad? He sighed heavily as we sat down. I've been looking over the numbers for the store, and something doesn't add up. We're moving more inventory than ever, but our profits are down, way down. I frowned, pulling up the spreadsheets on my computer. As we pored over the figures, a sickening realization dawned on me. The discounts we'd been offering the Caldwell project were far too steep. We were barely breaking even on most orders. How could I have missed this? I whispered, horror washing over me. Dad squeezed my shoulder. You've had a lot on your plate, sweetheart, but we need to fix this and fast, or we'll be out of business within months. Just then my phone buzzed with a text from Peter. Emergency at the hotel site. Need you here ASAP. I looked at my father, torn between my responsibilities to the store and my commitment to the new venture. Go, he said softly. But Megan, be careful. Make sure you're not losing yourself in all of this. At the construction site, I found Peter in heated discussion with his father and a group of contractors. The tension in the air was palpable. Ah, Megan, there you are, Robert Caldwell boomed. We need your expertise. These gentlemen seem to think we need to cut corners on some of the materials to stay on budget. I told them we have a deal with your store for top-quality supplies at the best prices. I felt the blood drain from my face. How could I tell them that those best prices were driving my family's business into the ground? Peter caught my eye, his brow furrowed in concern. Meg, what do you think? In that moment, standing amidst the half-built walls of our future, I felt the weight of my decisions crushing down on me. The store that had been my family's legacy for generations was on the brink of failure because of my poor management. The grand plans I'd made with Peter and his family suddenly seemed like a house of cards, ready to topple at the slightest breeze. I need some time to look over the numbers, I managed to say, my voice shaking slightly. Can we reconvene tomorrow? Robert frowned, clearly displeased, but Peter quickly stepped in. Of course, we all want to make the best decision here. Let's take a day to review everything. As the group dispersed, Peter pulled me aside. What's going on, Meg? You look like you've seen a ghost. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. Peter, we need to talk about the store, about this project, about us. His face fell, sensing the gravity of my words. Okay, he said quietly. Let's go somewhere private. As we walked away from the bustling construction site, I knew I was at a crossroads. The choices I made in the next few hours would determine not just the fate of my family's business, but the course of my entire future. Could I find a way to save the store without jeopardizing my relationship with Peter and his family? Or was I about to lose everything I'd worked so hard to build? With each step, the weight of my engagement ring seemed to grow heavier, a reminder of all that was at stake. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake at 3 a.m. Peter's name flashed on the screen, sending a chill down my spine. Meg, it's Dad, Peter's voice cracked. He's had a heart attack. We're at the hospital. The next few hours passed in a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. By dawn, Robert Caldwell was stable but unconscious. The doctors spoke of a long recovery, and as I watched Caroline collapse into tears, I knew everything was about to change. Peter pulled me aside, his face haggard. Meg, I need to step in at the hotel. Dad's been running everything, and with the new expansion. I nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility suddenly thrust upon him. Of course, what can I do to help? Little did I know those words would come back to haunt me. Over the next few weeks, I watched Peter transform. The caring, supportive man I'd fallen in love with vanished, replaced by a stressed, short-tempered stranger. He threw himself into work, often staying at the hotel until the early hours of the morning. One evening, exhausted from juggling the hardware store and helping with the hotel, I arrived at Peter's office with dinner, hoping for a quiet moment together. Instead, I found him shouting at a group of employees, "I don't care if it's not in the budget. Make it happen, or find another job." The workers scurried out, leaving Peter and me alone. He turned, his eyes blazing. "What are you doing here?" I held up the takeout bag, suddenly feeling foolish. "I thought we could have dinner together. Maybe talk about the wedding plans." Peter scoffed. "Wedding plans? Meg, we're in the middle of a crisis here. The expansion is behind schedule, over budget, and you're worried about flower arrangements?" His words stung like a slap. "Peter, I'm trying to help, but I'm also trying to save my family's business. The discounts we're giving you—" "Oh, here we go again," he interrupted, rolling his eyes. "Meg, it's business. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the greater good." "The greater good?" I echoed, incredulous. "Peter, we're talking about my family's livelihood." He slammed his hand on the desk, making me jump. "And we're talking about my family's legacy. Do you have any idea how much pressure I'm under? My father built this empire, and now it's all on me." I took a step back, suddenly seeing Peter in a new light. "What happened to we're in this together?" I asked quietly. His face softened for a moment, a flicker of the old Peter shining through. "Meg, I'm sorry, I'm drowning here." I reached out to him, but he turned away, his attention caught by a ringing phone. "I have to take this. We'll talk later, okay?" But later never seemed to come. Days turned into weeks, and Peter grew more distant, more demanding. The hotel staff walked on eggshells around him, and I found myself constantly running interference, trying to smooth over his harsh words and unreasonable demands. One afternoon, as I was reviewing invoices in the hotel office, I overheard Peter in a heated conversation with his mother. "We can't keep operating like this, Peter." Caroline's voice was strained. "Your father would never—" "Well, Dad's not here, is he?" Peter snapped. "And if we don't turn this around, there won't be a hotel for him to come back to." "And what about Megan?" Caroline asked softly. "Have you thought about what this is doing to her, to your relationship?" There was a long pause before Peter replied, his voice cold. "Megan will understand. This is business, Mom. Nothing personal." I felt my world crumble around me. The man I loved, the future I dreamed of, it was all slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. As I stood there, frozen in shock, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. "Emergency at the store. Need you here now." In that moment, torn between the crumbling remains of my personal life and the family business I'd sworn to protect, I realized I was facing the biggest crisis of my life. Everything I cared about was at stake, and I had no idea how to save it all. With trembling hands, I gathered my things and slipped out of the hotel, Peter's harsh words still ringing in my ears. As I drove towards an uncertain future, I wondered if there was anything left of my dreams to salvage, or if it was time to cut my losses and start anew. The hardware store was in chaos when I arrived. Dad stood amidst a sea of paperwork, his face ashen. "Megan, we're in trouble. Big trouble." As we pored over the books, the full extent of our crisis became clear. The steep discounts we'd given the Caldwell Hotel had pushed us to the brink of bankruptcy. We had less than a month before we'd have to close our doors for good. "I'm so sorry, Dad," I whispered, guilt crushing me. "This is all my fault." He squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart. We always do." But as I drove back to the hotel, determination replaced my despair. I'd fix this mess, with or without Peter's help. The hotel lobby was a flurry of activity when I arrived. Sarah, the head of housekeeping, rushed up to me, her eyes wild. "Thank goodness you're here, Megan. Half the staff just quit, and we have a full house tonight." I took a deep breath, pushing my own problems aside. "Okay, let's get to work." For the next 12 hours, I was everywhere at once, checking in guests, making beds, soothing frayed nerves. By midnight, we'd managed to avert disaster, but I was exhausted. As I slumped against the front desk, Caroline appeared, concern etched on her face. "Megan, dear, you look terrible. Where's Peter?" I laughed bitterly. "Your guess is as good as mine. He hasn't answered his phone all day." Caroline's expression hardened. "This isn't like him. Something's wrong." Just then, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hello? Is this Megan?" a woman's voice asked. "I'm calling from the Oasis Hotel. There's a gentleman here who's had too much to drink. He says he's your fiancé." My heart sank. "I'll be right there." I found Peter slumped at the bar of our biggest competitor, barely conscious. As I half carried him to my car, he mumbled, "I'm sorry, Meg, I've ruined everything." Back at our hotel, I helped him to bed, my mind racing. How had we come to this? The next morning, I was back at the front desk when Peter stumbled down, looking worse for wear. "Meg, we need to talk." But before he could continue, a group of angry investors burst in, led by Robert Caldwell himself, looking frail but furious. "Where's my son?" Robert demanded. "What's he done to my hotel?" As accusations flew and tempers flared, I found myself stepping between Peter and the angry mob. "Everyone, please, let's discuss this calmly." For the next hour, I mediated a tense meeting, piecing together the extent of Peter's mismanagement. He'd made risky investments, alienated key partners, and nearly run the hotel into the ground. When the dust settled, Robert turned to me, his eyes shrewd. "Megan, you've shown remarkable leadership today. How would you like to take over as interim manager?" I blinked, stunned. "But what about Peter?" Robert's face hardened. "My son needs time to get his act together. The hotel needs someone competent at the helm." As the weight of the offer sank in, I realized this was my chance to save not just the hotel, but my family store as well. But could I do it? And at what cost to my relationship with Peter? I looked at Peter, hoping to see some sign of the man I'd fallen in love with, but his eyes were cold, resentful. "Go ahead, Meg. Take it. You've always wanted to be in charge anyway." His words stung, but they also ignited a fire within me. "You know what? I will." Turning to Robert, I squared my shoulders. "I accept, on one condition. We renegotiate our contract with my family's hardware store. Fair prices that benefit both businesses." Robert nodded, impressed. "Done." As the room cleared out, I found myself alone with Peter. The air between us crackled with unspoken words and broken promises. "So this is it?" Peter said, his voice bitter. "You're taking everything from me?" I felt my heart breaking, but I stood my ground. "No, Peter, you did this to yourself." As he stormed out, I sank into a chair, the enormity of what lay ahead crashing down on me. I'd saved the hotel and my family's store, but at what cost? Could I really do this alone? Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. "Proud of you, kiddo. You've got this." Taking a deep breath, I stood up. It was time to get to work. The real test was just beginning. 6 months had passed since I took over as interim manager of the Caldwell Hotel. Every day had been a battle, but slowly, surely, we were turning things around. The staff rallied behind me, the guests were happy, and even Robert Caldwell had started to smile again. I hadn't heard from Peter in weeks. Part of me was relieved, while another part ached for closure. But I had no time for regrets. I had a hotel to run and a family business to save. It was a busy Friday afternoon when I saw him walk through the lobby doors. My heart stuttered. Peter looked good. Too good. Tanned, well-dressed, with a sparkle in his eye I hadn't seen in months, and on his arm was a young woman, her laughter tinkling across the marble floor. "Megan," Peter called out, his voice jovial. "Just the person I wanted to see." I steeled myself, plastering on a professional smile. "Peter, welcome back. How can I help you?" He grinned, pulling the woman closer. "Megan, I'd like you to meet Sophia, my fiancé." The world tilted on its axis. "Fiancé?" I repeated, my voice sounding far away. Peter nodded, oblivious to my shock. "We met on my trip to the Bahamas. It was love at first sight. Anyway, we're here to plan our wedding. I want to host it here, at the hotel, for old time's sake." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "I see. And what does your father think about this?" Peter waved dismissively. "Oh, Dad will come around. Once he sees how happy I am, how successful I've become with my new business ventures, he'll understand why I needed to step away from the hotel." I nodded, had my mind racing. "Of course. Well, congratulations. If you'll excuse me, I need to check on something in the office. Sarah here will help you with your reservation." As I turned to leave, Peter caught my arm. "Oh, and Meg? I'll need those divorce papers signed ASAP, for the wedding, you know?" I pulled away, my voice ice cold. "I'll have my lawyer contact you." In my office, I allowed myself a moment to break down. Tears of anger, hurt, and frustration flowed freely. But as I looked at the framed photo on my desk, my daughter, my parents, and me at the grand reopening of our hardware store, I felt a steely resolve settle over me. Taking a deep breath, I made a call. "Robert, it's Megan. We need to talk." An hour later, I walked back into the lobby, my head held high. Peter and Sophia were at the bar, champagne flutes in hand. "Peter," I called out, my voice steady. "A word, please?" He sauntered over, cocky grin in place. "What's up, Meg? Everything set for the wedding?" I smiled, sweet as poison. "Not quite. You see, there's been a change in management you should know about." Peter's grin faltered. "What do you mean?" "Well, your father and the board were so impressed with my work these past months, they've offered me the position of permanent general manager, with a significant ownership stake." The color drained from Peter's face. But that's my position, my birthright." I shook my head. "Not anymore." "Oh, and about that wedding? I'm afraid we're fully booked for the next year. You understand, don't you? It's just business after all, nothing personal." As Peter sputtered and raged, I saw Sophia slip away, her eyes wide with realization. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You can't do this," Peter hissed. "I'll fight you. You'll what?" I interrupted. "Sue your own family's hotel? Go ahead. I'm sure the press will love that story." As security escorted a fuming Peter out, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I'd faced my greatest challenge and come out stronger. The hotel was thriving, my family's store was saved, and I had finally found my own path. Later that evening, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she asked, "Mommy, are you happy?" I smiled, realizing the truth in my answer. "Yes, sweetheart, I really am." As I closed her bedroom door, my phone buzzed with a message from Caroline. "Dinner tomorrow? We have some exciting expansion plans to discuss." I grinned, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The storm had passed, and I had not only weathered it, but emerged victorious. The future was bright, and this time, I was in control. Standing at the window, looking out at the twinkling lights of the city, I raised a silent toast to myself. To new beginnings, hard-won victories, and the sweet taste of well-deserved success. The best revenge, after all, is living well. And I intended to do just that.